It was the summer of 1998. 16-year-old Nisha and her 13-year-old brother Aman were beyond excited. For the first time in years, they were spending their summer vacation with their grandparents, who lived in a small village near Shimla. They hadn't seen them in nearly 10 years, and the thought of visiting their old farmhouse made the trip feel like a real adventure. After a long train ride, they finally arrived at Shimla station. To their surprise, they were the only passengers getting off the train. Standing on the platform were their grandparents, waiting for them with smiles on their faces. The two children rushed over and hugged them. At first glance, everything seemed normal. But there was something strange about them. Even though it was a hot summer afternoon, both of them were wrapped in thick shawls. Their smiles felt forced, and there was an odd emptiness in their eyes. Nisha and Aman didn't think much about it. They were simply happy to see them again. During the drive to the farmhouse, the children excitedly talked about their train journey. Their grandparents barely spoke. They simply nodded along and occasionally glanced at the children through the rearview mirror. About an hour later, they arrived at the farmhouse. The house looked old and neglected. The walls were faded yellow, weeds had grown everywhere, and there wasn't another house in sight. The place felt isolated from the rest of the world. Outside on the porch sat an old rocking chair. Oddly enough, it was gently rocking back and forth even though there wasn't any wind. Aman laughed and joked that the place looked like something straight out of a horror movie. The siblings chuckled and followed their grandparents inside. The interior of the farmhouse felt just as old. Black and white photographs covered the walls. The furniture was worn and dusty. Most disturbing of all was a strange odor hanging in the air. It smelled like something was rotting. When the children asked about it, their grandmother smiled and said it was just the smell of manure coming from the fields. Soon it was time for dinner. Everyone sat around the dining table, but something felt off. Their grandparents sat with them but never touched any food. Instead, they kept repeating how happy they were that the children had come to visit. The behavior seemed strange, but Nisha and Aman assumed it was because they had missed them for so many years. After dinner, the children headed to their room. A little while later, their grandfather came in to say goodnight. Before leaving, he switched off the light and gave them a warning. "At night, you'll hear animals outside," he said. "Whatever you hear, don't be afraid, and most importantly, don't leave your room." With that, he closed the door behind him. Exhausted from their journey, both children quickly fell asleep. The next 2 days passed quietly. Every morning, their grandparents would wake them up, leave breakfast in the kitchen, and head out to work in the fields. They wouldn't return until late in the evening. Most of the day, Nisha sat by a window sketching trees. Aman spent his time exploring the property or sitting on an old swing behind the house while listening to music on his Walkman. The farmhouse had a landline phone, but it didn't work. That meant they couldn't call their parents no matter how much they wanted to. As the days passed, more strange things began to stand out. Their grandparents never ate in front of them. Whenever mealtime came around, they always found an excuse not to touch the food. One afternoon, Aman opened the refrigerator. Inside was only a single metal pot filled with a thick red liquid. When he asked his grandmother about it, she simply said it was an old family recipe. Then she burst into loud, uncontrollable laughter. It wasn't the first time. She often laughed for no reason at all. Meanwhile, their grandfather would sometimes sit in the same spot for hours, staring at nothing. The children convinced themselves it was just old age, but deep down they knew something wasn't right. One night, Nisha suddenly woke up. A sound outside her room had disturbed her sleep. She looked toward the door and saw a large shadow pass underneath it. Remembering her grandfather's warning, she hesitated. Then curiosity got the better of her. Quietly, she got out of bed and opened the door. The strange odor immediately hit her nose again. This time it was much stronger. The hallway was dark. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard a dragging sound. Whatever was making that noise didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like something else. Before she could investigate further, a hand suddenly landed on her shoulder. Nisha screamed. She spun around and found her grandmother standing behind her. Her face looked unnaturally pale. That same eerie smile stretched across her lips. Without saying much, her grandmother calmly told her to go back to bed. Terrified, Nisha returned to her room. She barely slept for the rest of the night. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Their grandparents acted as though nothing had happened. After breakfast, they left for the fields just like always. As soon as the front door closed, Nisha finally felt relieved. Later that afternoon, Aman was sitting on the swing behind the house doing his vacation homework. Suddenly, he heard children laughing inside the farmhouse. Confused, he walked to a nearby window and peeked inside. For a split second, he saw the shadow of a small boy. Thinking someone had come to visit, he rushed inside, but there was nobody there, only Nisha. Aman searched every room but found nothing. Then something else caught his attention. A black and white photograph sitting in the living room. When he looked closely, he froze. It appeared as though blood was flowing from his grandparents' eyes in the picture. Terrified, he immediately called Nisha, but when she arrived, the photo looked completely normal. By now, both children were frightened. Nisha told Aman about what had happened during the night. Aman shared what he had seen. They both agreed on one thing: something was terribly wrong in that house. The farmhouse had only 3 bedrooms. Their grandparents' room was located upstairs. Unlike the rest of the house, it was always locked. The children also noticed that the awful smell seemed strongest near that room. Determined to uncover the truth, they searched through a ring of old keys until they finally found one that fit the lock. Slowly, they opened the door. The moment it swung open, a wave of foul, rotten air rushed out. The smell was unbearable. Covering their noses, they stepped inside. What they saw made their blood run cold. 2 decaying bodies were lying on the bed. The children stood frozen in horror. Then Nisha noticed something around one of the bodies' necks. A necklace. It was the exact same necklace her grandmother always wore. Her heart nearly stopped. The horrifying truth became clear. The bodies lying on that bed were their real grandparents. For a moment, neither child could speak. If their grandparents had been dead this entire time, then who were the people they had been living with for the past several days? And what terrifying secret was hiding inside that lonely farmhouse? To be continued.